Hey everyone, this is Ethan. Sorry it's a little bit late tonight, this recording for the Colts. I actually watched a really good movie tonight, Race to Nowhere. It's about the education system in America. It was really super cool and really opened my eyes to some of the things going on and gave me some new insights into the issue. But anyway, away from education, onto the Colts, the Indianapolis Colts, our team 22 that we're going to be doing. And before I get too deep into their analysis, I want to share an anecdote and something which I think Colts fans would find interesting. So, and NFL fans as well. So, of course, as I mentioned in previous videos, I went to the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference this year, which was a gathering of some of the top minds in the industry. A bunch of people came. General managers were there. A lot of scouts, a lot of team reps, a lot of reps of people who are in the business and overall, like guys just trading their wares about new themes in sports analysis and all that great stuff. Out of all the participants there was only one head coach in any of the four major sports who came not to sit on a panel, but just to learn and just to see what else was going on. And that man was Jim Caldwell. And I actually had the pleasure to have an extended conversation with Mr. Caldwell for 25, 30 minutes. And I have to say, first of all, he's the most humble guy I've ever met. He is a sensational person. And every time you speak to him, he just really sort of is emblematic of the hardworking spirit that embodies so many coaches today. And you could definitely tell he's a Dungy disciple, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Dungy for some other reasons, but just that general humility. He was the most humble person who I have met in a very long time. And he was one of my two favorite people at the conference, along with Mike Carey, the referee who called Patriots Giants, who also was exceedingly humble and amazingly well spoken. But my two favorite people by far, most intelligent people who I met there as well. But then also, he was just talking about why he was at the conference. And he was saying that he honestly doesn't know that much about analytics, except he's always trying to evolve, always trying to learn, and he just wants to work however hard he can and step however far outside his comfort zone that he has to step out in order to be better prepared for the new future that the NFL is going to throw at him. Because all these other teams are moving on and they're moving past analytics. And Bill Polian, pretty famously, is not a huge proponent of analytics. Yet a lot of Colts scouts and a lot of Colts personnel came to this conference, and they were there to learn on their own accord. And at least the impression that I got was that Bill Polian brings his own thing to the table, and then everybody else uses stats and analytics and their own styles of management to sort of come up with their own opinions on players. And then when it comes to the draft board, they will come together, and then they will pick who they should take. And I found that interesting. Because Bill Polian, of course, has an amazing track record in terms of evaluating and picking talent. He always takes guys who I like, for better or for worse. I was a huge fan of Anthony Gonzalez coming out of school. I really liked him. I love Donald Brown coming out of school. Unfortunately, one of them is injured all the time. The other one is mediocre and doesn't have an offensive line to run behind. So, didn't work out too well for either of them, at least at this point. But he picks for his scheme, and economically speaking, one of my favorite little economic factoids. The cover 2 scheme that is run by Indianapolis is probably the most cost-effective scheme in the NFL. A lot of people switch over to the 3-4 outside linebacker defense and the 3-4 either Fairbanks or one gap, one of those schemes. That seems to be in vogue right now. But in reality, if you are a team looking to change your defense up, you should switch to cover 2 and Tampa 2. Because the Tampa 2 defense is going to prevent big plays. It makes it a lot easier to find linebackers and cornerbacks because you don't have to take them until a little bit later in the draft. Although, you could take a cornerback early, but you don't have to if you don't want to. And overall, I mean, teams have been fine with that sort of defense. Tampa Bay, Chicago, Indy. Indy maybe a little bit lesser, but all three made the playoffs last year. All three have respectable defenses, even though they're slightly different variations. I don't want to say that they're all the same type of Tampa 2 cover 2, but the concept is there. So I think that it's interesting to see how they've sort of, despite not being the most advanced teams metrics wise and statistics wise, they still sort of outthought the system by staying true to themselves and by doing something that not everyone else is doing, zigging when everyone else zags. So looking at who the Colts would like, they could really use a defensive tackle. I know I just went on that entire thing about their defense, but they need a defensive tackle pretty badly. And there are a couple of guys who would make really good fits for them. Corey Luggett out of Illinois has a lot of potential in a 4-3. I think he's more 4-3 than 3-4. And he's a Midwestern guy. They love taking guys out of the Big Ten because it's local, so it's easy to scout. And in the past, we've seen them sort of have a pull toward those kind of guys before. I mean, Gonzalez was from Ohio State, and he was actually taken a little bit higher than his value at the time. And then there are also guys in their team like Mike Hart, though was a little bit of a later pick, still Big Ten. They're Dallas Clark, of course. So there's definitely some sort of pull to that area. Then on the other hand, there's a guy like Steven Paella, who would be dynamite in a 4-3. Can't play 3-4. But he would be great in a 4-3. And I honestly don't think that there are two players in this draft whose stocks are more tied to each other other than maybe Daquan Bowers and Robert Quinn, than Corey Luggett and Steven Paella. If Luggett's stock rises as highly as some projected to, and some are saying that he could be a top 15 pick, even to St. Louis at 14, which is possible, but I'm not 100% behind it. It's possible, though, for sure. He is a four-pillar player. Then I see Paella being a clear top candidate this slot. But if Luggett slips, I don't think Paella gets drafted in the first round. So I think that there's definitely a back and forth there they have to consider. Gun to my head, I think that they would take Luggett over Paella because local guy, he fits a little bit more of the scheme, and he would be an interesting guy to plug into Indy's defensive line. But either one would be a sensational addition to this team. Some other possibilities, if Tyron Smith somehow falls, or if they decide to trade up, he would be the kind of guy that they would target. Not a more big-bodied offensive tackle. They like more athletic guys on their offensive line. We've seen that. I mean, Charlie Johnson started there. He is certainly not a mauler. Ryan Deem, not a mauler. Tariq Glenn, even to some extent, was more of a dancing guy than a mauler, though he actually had the best strength of anyone that they've had in their offensive line in years. So guys like Smith, guys like Nate Solder, those would be the kind of guys they would target in their offensive line rather than, say, a Gabe Carimi or an Anthony Costanzo. Costanzo's a little bit more likely than Carimi. I don't see a Carimi pick coming in their future. But they could go offensive line. I could see them going a couple of other directions too. The one other good thing about their offensive scheme is that they have some sort of leniency to take offensive linemen later, speedier, more athletic types. Especially with a lot of teams shifting away from speedier, athletic offensive linemen, there aren't that many teams that run zone blocking schemes anymore. Teams are looking more, teams are definitely skewing a little bit more toward the mauler type. Guys like Jason Kels out of Cincinnati, if he's around in the 4th or 5th round, I don't see how he isn't a Colt. Guys like Ryan Bartholomew out of Syracuse, who would be an ideal person to sit behind Jeff Saturday for a little while and then eventually take over. I can see them going wide receiver late as well. Austin Collie, great find, but he needs some help. Pierre Garçon is very good. Reggie Wayne is getting older. Blair White was someone completely out of nowhere and completely random. You can't just expect that to happen every year. And there are going to be some good route-running wide receivers with good hands who will be available in this draft. Maybe even Cecil Shorts, a fellow Mount Unioner similar to Garcon. So, end of the day, Colts are an interesting team to look at. I think that I definitely spent most of the video talking about like a personal experience I had with Indy because I think that that's very relevant. And looking at Indy, it's a marriage between tradition and evolution. And that's how I would classify that team. Tradition, evolution coming together. And they need to sort of continue to evolve as a passing team and also as a rushing team, as well as staying true to their defensive scheme and to the other things that they implement. So that's all for now. Feel free to tweet me at Ethan Ham. Feel free to comment on the video if you have any questions. And I will be back tomorrow with the Eagles. So I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.